Welcome to VNT. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In a stunning and unexpected decision, the Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping tariffs, sending shockwaves through the nation's political and economic institutions. The ruling, which came after months of heated arguments and intense public scrutiny, has left both supporters and critics of the administration reeling. These tariffs, imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, were originally justified as a means to protect American industries and national security, but the court found that the administration had overstepped its legal authority, raising fundamental questions about the limits of executive power. The ruling is a major check on presidential authority, fundamentally reshaping the nation's economic and political landscape. Legal experts say it could set a precedent for future cases, curbing the ability of any president to unilaterally impose sweeping economic measures without congressional approval. These tariffs were the centerpiece of Trump's economic agenda, sparking years of debate, uncertainty, and fierce lobbying from both business leaders and labor unions. For many, they symbolized a new era of American protectionism, but for others, they brought higher costs and global trade tensions. Now, the court's intervention brings this chapter to a dramatic close, invalidating a policy that touched nearly every American business, from small manufacturers to multinational corporations. Across the country, business owners are reacting with a mix of relief, confusion, and anticipation about what comes next. The decision challenges long-held assumptions about the court's political leanings, signaling a judiciary determined to assert its independence, even in the face of intense political pressure. Editorials and headlines across the nation are already hailing the ruling as a defining moment for the court's legacy. Businesses are now seeking billions in refunds for tariffs they paid, while politicians on both sides of the aisle scramble to control the narrative and respond to the new legal landscape. The scramble for answers and accountability is just beginning, as lawmakers debate how to move forward. One thing is clear: by redrawing the map of power in Washington, the Supreme Court has set off a chain reaction that will reverberate for years to come. The aftershocks of this decision are only just beginning to be felt, and the nation now faces a new era of legal and political uncertainty. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods, designed to make foreign products more expensive and protect domestic industries. While intended to boost local manufacturing, tariffs often lead to higher prices for everyday items, affecting consumers and businesses alike. President Trump used tariffs as a key weapon in his America First strategy, targeting countries like China to rebalance trade and revive U.S. industries. These measures marked a sharp break from decades of bipartisan support for free trade. Trump invoked emergency powers to impose tariffs quickly, arguing economic security was a national emergency. But this aggressive use of executive authority set the stage for the legal battles that followed. The legal fight over Trump's tariffs began the moment they were announced, sending shockwaves through the business community and legal circles alike. Almost immediately, the sweeping nature of the tariffs raised questions about the limits of presidential power and the checks and balances built into the American system. Lawsuits poured in from businesses, industry groups, and even some state governments, all claiming the president had overstepped his authority. Many argued that the tariffs threatened their livelihoods, disrupted global supply chains, and set a dangerous precedent for future executive actions. In the lower courts, judges carefully examined whether the president's use of emergency powers under laws like the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, was justified. Their rulings found that these emergency laws weren't intended to be used for broad, long-term trade policy, but rather for specific, time-limited crises. These early victories for the challengers sent ripples through Washington, prompting the Supreme Court to fast-track the case. The justices recognized that the outcome would have far-reaching consequences for the nation's economy and the separation of powers. In a rare move, the Supreme Court scheduled oral arguments for early November, bypassing the usual lengthy appeals process. This signaled just how urgent and significant the case had become in the eyes of the judiciary. The stakes were enormous, not just for American businesses and workers, but for the very future of U.S. trade policy and the delicate balance of power between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. The world watched closely, knowing the decision could reshape global commerce. The journey from the initial flurry of lawsuits to the highest court in the land highlighted the resilience and adaptability of the American judicial process. Each step revealed new arguments, legal strategies, and interpretations of the Constitution. Even the most powerful executive actions can be rigorously challenged, tested, and ultimately shaped by the courts. This case would test the boundaries of presidential authority like never before. As the nation awaited the Supreme Court's decision, the stage was set for a historic showdown, one that would echo through the halls of government and the global economy for years to come. At the Supreme Court, the administration argued that emergency laws gave the president broad authority to protect national security and American industries. They claimed tariffs were a necessary response to foreign threats, and the courts should defer to the executive's judgment. Opponents countered that only Congress can impose taxes, and using emergency powers for sweeping economic changes set a dangerous precedent. They argued that long-term economic competition isn't a national emergency, and the president was overreaching. The case became a battle over the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority. The ruling has triggered a scramble for refunds, with companies seeking billions paid in unlawful tariffs. Government agencies now face a massive administrative challenge, processing hundreds of thousands of claims. Delays and further litigation are likely as businesses demand reimbursement. For consumers, the end of tariffs could mean lower prices and relief from inflation. Many businesses see the decision as a lifeline, removing costly barriers and uncertainty. But industries that benefited from protection now face renewed global competition and tough adjustments. The ruling forces a national reckoning on the trade-offs of protectionism. The Supreme Court's decision has ignited fierce political debate. Democrats hail it as a victory for the rule of law and a check on executive overreach. President Trump and his allies condemn the ruling as a disaster for American workers and sovereignty, rallying their base ahead of the midterms. The verdict complicates perceptions of the court's partisanship, as a conservative majority struck down a Republican president's signature policy. Both sides are using the decision to energize supporters, ensuring the court's role remains central in political discourse. As the next election cycle approaches, the echoes of this ruling will shape campaign arguments nationwide. This landmark ruling is part of a broader, ongoing effort by the Supreme Court to clarify and define the limits of presidential power in the United States. Over the years, the court has played a crucial role in interpreting the Constitution and ensuring that no single branch of government becomes too powerful. This decision is the latest in a series of cases that address the delicate balance between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The decision sets a significant precedent for stricter checks on executive authority, especially in situations where presidential actions may encroach upon Congress's constitutional powers. By reinforcing the separation of powers, the court is sending a clear message that the president cannot act unilaterally without oversight or accountability. This ruling could have far-reaching implications for how future presidents approach their responsibilities and interact with Congress. Other major cases concerning the scope of executive power are still pending before the court, signaling a possible shift toward a more constrained and carefully monitored presidency. Legal scholars and political analysts are closely watching these developments, as they could reshape the very nature of American governance and the relationship between the branches of government. For decades, presidents from both parties have expanded their reach through executive orders, emergency declarations, and other unilateral actions. These tools have often been used to bypass legislative gridlock or respond quickly to national crises. However, critics argue that such expansions of power can undermine democratic principles and erode the system of checks and balances. Now, in light of this ruling, future leaders may be forced to work more closely with Congress to achieve their policy goals. This could lead to more negotiation, compromise, and collaboration between the branches, potentially resulting in more stable and broadly supported policies. The ruling reaffirms the judiciary's essential role as the guardian of constitutional boundaries, ensuring that the foundational principles of American democracy are upheld. By stepping in to resolve disputes over executive authority, the Supreme Court helps maintain the balance of power that is central to the nation's system of government. In an era marked by deep political polarization and intense debate over the proper scope of presidential power, the Supreme Court's verdict will shape legal and political discussions for years to come. As the nation looks to the future, the boundaries of executive authority will remain a central issue in American democracy.